14 weeks with them, 10 to 12 weeks in the shorter waves, on the shop floor, in their organization, with them, training them on all the different tools and how to do things, for them to become better at helping themselves. But we said, what do we do with the global division CFOs and the global BU controllers and the group CFO?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're not going to spend 12 weeks with them and follow them around, because they have a different way of working and different responsibilities and different activities. So we do what we call kind of executive management training for them. So we put together a management curriculum, so a series of trainings on the same kind of topics, but more like a training package. So it was four different elements that we had. So basically 4 times half a day training with all of those top people in the finance organization and ABB.
Okay, because I'm going to interview the country CFOs. So
Yes.
Is this how they get their, and the questions will be based on lean leadership, but is this how they get their training?
The country CFOs are part of the wave.
Are part of the wave?
Yes, so they're part of the bottom-up training, you could say.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of get it hands-on the shop floor. The lean champions are there, coaching them, teaching them. And the global guys, they got 4 sets of trainings, you could say.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Different approach. So when we say we go and maybe we go and do a site visit, for instance, what we do is we go out to the field, which could also be on the second floor again here in Cityport, and we maybe visit some huddles and see how the shop floor is actually working. But it's important to also have the higher level of the organization engaged and using the same kind of tools. So I'm sure you're aware, Giselle, that having a huddle, which is the visualization of the operational management. So we have huddle boards on different levels. So, for instance, in the UK, where we have done the implementation now, the individual teams have their huddle boards, physical or virtual, depending on whether they sit together or not. I have a huddle board as a country CFO, which enables my direct reports to escalate things up to my huddle and bring that discussion up to me. Ideally, my region CFO would also have a huddle board. Now he doesn't. But I do know, of course, that Timo, our group CFO, has a huddle board, and Alex Hall has a huddle board. So there are ways and means to escalate in the organization, and that's very important, because that's one of the core principles of lean. When you apply that system, that whole methodology has to be applied at all levels in the organization, because if the management layer does not work with the same principles, then they will not understand what's happening at the bottom. And the people at the bottom on the shop floor will get frustrated because they'll escalate stuff upwards, but it's not getting recognition and getting taken into consideration as we would if we apply lean.
Amazing. Really lovely insight. How do you decide which countries and finance teams to touch and to implement lean in?
So we did a flight plan, we called it, so basically an implementation plan for the scope that was part of the 1,000-day program White Collar Productivity. We said within those 1,000 days we would touch approximately, I think it was 1,600 or 1,700 employees. And then we basically sat down and did, you could say, a demand and supply calculation. So we know, of course, we have data regarding in which countries do we have how many finance employees and whether they are in a function like tax or treasury, or if they are in the business, being business controllers. And we basically made that plan in a way that we said, let's touch the biggest ones first and the smallest ones last. So we started off with large countries like China, US, Germany. We continued with other large countries like Sweden, Finland, Canada. We stayed in China for quite a while, actually. Did India in between as well. And then we've been continuing down and down the size chain. So in the meantime, we're doing countries like the UK. We are much smaller from an FTE perspective in finance than the large countries. and we are still continuing on that journey. So the last wave, which is actually almost going outside of the 1,000 days, is the one that we're kicking off now in December.
Yeah.
That's the last wave of the final scope.
And
now,
then have you reached
we will have met the requirements of how many people to touch.
Yeah.
Because we were quite opportunistic as well.
Yeah.
So we made sure in each country when we were there anyway that we maximized the scope. So technically we will have met the requirements for the 1,000-day program. But we also know that we have left some part of the organization behind, because in some countries, the countries were so large, we did not have enough supply. And that's what I mean with demand and supply. We didn't have enough lean champions to be able to cover everything. So going forward, after the 1,000-day program, which ends now in December 2017, we have decided in the function to continue with lean. Mm-hmm. And we have 3 focus areas going forward. We are going to cover the pieces that were left over.
Yeah.
We are going to cover the GBS front offices.
Yeah.
And we need to stabilize our CI function, CI standing for continuous improvement.
Okay.
Because obviously a lean wave is only to get the organization kicked off, to start working in this new way, and we need to make sure that we give them enough support afterwards to make them stand alone and sustainable over time.
Amazing. I mean, you basically answered my next question. It was how much of the finance population have you reached so far? What was your initial target? And where are you now? So you said about 1,700 people?
Yeah, if I recall, we can check that with Greg as well, but I think we've covered something like 1,700, which was also the original plan for the original scope. But obviously, there is much more people out there. And there were some very specific decisions made at the beginning of the journey as to which part of the organization to cover and not. So, for instance, there were decisions made to not cover project controlling.
Yeah.
Now, we made some decisions to do that in specific cases anyway. And now, in the meantime, everybody's screaming and wanting to have it. But there is probably at least as many people left out there. I think the front office people, the GBS front office people, that's probably around 600 that we need to cover, let's say, in the next 2 years or something. And I'm sure there is another, I don't know, we can check with Greg so you get the right numbers, but there's probably another 600 or 800 or maybe even 1,000 people out there if you want to cover all of finance, including project controlling and factory controllers and all of that kind of stuff.
Will that also be done in waves? Or will
that will also be done in waves. So everything that's shop floor, as we called it in the beginning, is all done with implementation waves.
Okay. And which implementation methodology did you use to implement lean and why?
So this is the implementation methodology is kind of to say we're on site in waves. We started off with the pilot wave was really long. It was 16 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we also needed to learn. We had never done this before, and we hired people into these positions, and most of them had no knowledge of this before.
Yeah.
So we needed to train ourselves. We speeded up then due to the fact that we had to do something within 1,000 days.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have a relatively, let's say, stable, right-sized organization of lean champions. We can go back to taking a little bit more time in the waves. But this is the implementation methodology. And why do we do it in waves? And why do we take lean champions to go out and accompany the people? It's because a lot of this is really about change management.
Okay.
It's not so much technically about learning tools. Well, yes, you do that as well. But the real change comes when a team lead or a manager starts applying different kind of leadership techniques. So it's not about whether your huddle board is technically perfect, or if you have done a perfect skill matrix, or if your processes are perfectly designed. No, it's about 2 things really. It's about being a leader rather than just a manager. So it gives a lot of challenges and changes to the people who are in leadership positions.